Welcome everybody to the latest in our TTA Spotlight series. A big thank you to Sam for organising it, and a big thank you to Charlotte Watson for hosting this one and for delivering this session. Charlotte is absolutely fantastic. A long and well-esteemed background in the tuition sector, and then before that as a teacher. I think I should go away as quickly as possible and leave her to take over. But yeah, absolutely fantastic person to learn from. Really, really successful as a tutor and well worth listening to. So I'll pass straight over to Charlotte. Thank you very much, Charlotte. Looking forward to hearing what we've got to say.
Thank you. One thing I will just say is this is not a presentation on a 3-point plan of how to. So if you're looking for how many people do I teach at one time, how much should I charge, please understand that I'm not coming from that place. What I want to do, as we all model as good educators, is to help you find those answers yourselves. Okay, I think sometimes it's very easy. When I first started tutoring in 2016, there were so few people out there I could contact. And I did have similar questions like, how much should I charge? How about this? What do I do about this? What do I do about that? And to be honest, coming from a place where I really had to dig deep and work things out myself has actually, I think, made me a much more confident tutor and someone who is really clear about what they stand for. Now, that doesn't mean we can't discuss things. I'm very happy to answer questions, but a lot of the time, a bit like a webinar I did last week, people ask me things like, what should the structure be? And it's like, how long's a piece of string? You know, it depends. So I will hopefully, though, help you to really identify what it is you want out of tutoring. So the first thing I've put up here is a bridge, because in a way, I'm hoping that this webinar will be a bridge for you. Some of you I know are already tutoring. Some of you I know were teachers. I was a teacher for 20 years. I was also a consultant for 2 London boroughs in education. I was also a deputy head. So it's very easy to think, okay, I've got lots of experience. I can nail this tuition, and get straight in. Oh my gosh. I'll tell you, that first year when I was tutoring and I did one-to-one solely for a first year, I was like, this is not what I was expecting. And I was thinking all the things I knew about teaching would help me. Now, of course they do. You know, your understanding of pedagogy as a teacher is second to none. Your understanding of working with children, if you've been a teacher, is second to none. But I still realized I had a lot to learn. And when I then transitioned to group tutoring, again, I'll never forget the first lesson I had, and I had an assistant with me. I said to her, this was rubbish. I said, I'm going to have to completely rethink what I do. This was awful. And she said, don't be silly. It wasn't. But I just really thought, no way can I do exactly what it is. So what I'm hoping to do is talk you through some of the thinking processes that I think are most helpful to then work out how to transition from teaching to tutoring. Okay, so hopefully that will become clear as we go along. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm also hoping for obviously some interaction and some feedback. So here's the next slide. And the next slide, hopefully, is we're going to start to think about our why. Now, this was just a wordle that I did. I thought about everything I was as a tutor, and I thought about everything I was as a teacher. Now, the one thing I do want to say is, oh, do you have a slight bias? And I want any of you to as well, because when you come out, sorry, I'm just going to wait for, yeah, that's great. Because obviously when I came out of teaching, I came out of teaching out of several traumatic experiences. So obviously me coming as a tutor now, I love it. And I have found my place in the tutoring world. So it's very difficult for me not to come with a certain lens. So just be aware of that. I suffered a lot of trauma in teaching. I suffered a lot of joy as well, and it wasn't 20 years of hell, but just bear that in mind. And I'm trying to come from a place of objectivity, because some of you might have absolutely loved being in the school situation. But be aware it can be a bit difficult at times for me to be completely objective. So bear that in mind. I'm not saying tutoring is everything and teaching is nothing, but it is from my experience, if that makes sense. So just bear that in mind. I have obviously, and well, not so much even an unconscious bias, I have a bias. We will come back to this slide in a minute, but for me, I want to talk about 3 areas, and I want to help you draw out 3 specific areas about the difference, if you like, between teaching and tutoring. And the reason I put arrows like that is those lines do get blurred at times. So for instance, I went from a one-to-one tutor in 2016. I now teach nearly 230 students in 14 groups, and those groups are of 16 in each group. So you could argue, teacher there, much more of a teacher than a tutor now. So, you know, we're gonna try and get as much out of this as we can in terms of all types of tutoring. And also I work both face-to-face and online. Right, next slide. So we're going to look at 3 main areas, okay? We're going to look at your why, your philosophy as a tutor, why you're doing this, how you see yourself. And I think if you can gauge how you see yourself and why you're doing this, this will become your driver that then can help you understand how to tutor as opposed to being a teacher. So before we go on to this first slide, would anyone like to say how they felt? I know you're not all teachers, so don't worry if you're not a teacher here, but let's start with teaching. How did you feel as a teacher? What did you feel your main kind of why was as a teacher? And I'd love to hear from any of you. You can put in chat, but I'm happy to hear you speak as well. So would anyone like to kick us off with what they were like as a teacher, what they felt their why was, their purpose when they went into school? Would anyone like to speak? Nikki.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I am currently a teacher and a tutor. With maybe I'm wondering whether to give it up. I have my notice in next week, so this course is fantastic. So I tutor art at home, and I can have a maximum of 5 people, and I love it. I really, really enjoy it. With the teaching side, I went into it because I wanted to inspire people. And I love because I'm with like the little ones, I love the process of getting them to play and learn through play. I like that aspect of teaching. But I have to say the art tutoring gives me much more joy.
So you think you can inspire more in the art tutoring session than in the lesson in school? What stops you from inspiring students in school? And again, I know our conversation, because let's face it, if you're a tutor here, there are reasons why you chose tutoring. So look, if it ends up being a little bit on the negative side, so be it. We're going to go where the conversation goes. But, you know.
I feel there's a lot of pressure in school, and I wouldn't necessarily, the things that I'm teaching of what the government's told us to teach is something I necessarily believe in.
Right.
And I do think there's a lot of money restrictions, like we definitely need more adults, and there isn't the funding there, and that frustrates me.
Thank you. Penny.
Hi there. Yes, I was a teacher for about 25 years, and now I'm a tutor, have been for 3 years. I really, really enjoyed teaching. What I really enjoyed the most actually was having a class and like looking after a form and getting to know all the kids and all their families. I really enjoyed that. What I didn't enjoy so much was the really, really, really long hours. I was in boarding school, and we did Saturdays as well. They were often nine-hour days. And my life was completely ruled for the 15 years I was in that boarding school. I mean, I did love it, and my kids went through with me. I loved it, but looking back, I think, my God, I don't know how I did it actually.
Yeah.
So now obviously I've made this transition 3 years
Yeah.
ago. I'm just loving the bespoke nature of the tutoring. Just
Excellent.
instead of having the whole class,
Yeah.
you can just home in on one person at a time, which has been a real luxury for me.
Excellent. And thank you for that. And Natasha's just put, my path to teaching was very intuitive. Knowing you a little bit, I can well see that. I always wanted a job with variety. Would you mind, Natasha, just explaining what you mean by variety?
I was bored with the idea of having to sort of do a monotonous, repetitive job. And the school where I spent the most amount of time, I felt overwhelmed, which is why I left. I felt undervalued and overwhelmed. But it did give me what I was seeking. I was, a sports teacher. I was an art teacher. I was just about everything in my time at that school. And so I think, I'm very conscious that that was what I asked for and that was what I was seeking.
Right. And do you feel you still have, we'll come on to tuition in a little bit more detail, but do you think you still have that variety now as a tutor?
I think absolutely. I think as it was Nikki that I think mentioned it, what we're told to teach in a government setting, I don't believe is suiting the world that we're existing in now. I think it's a very dated practice. And I feel like tutoring offers me the creativity and variety to do things in a more bespoke manner.
Excellent. Right. So although I tutor English, there are very few words. In fact, there's only words at the end to say how you can get a hold of me. But what you will notice is there's a lot of metaphors. So I bring in my English this way. So for me, yeah, as a teacher, I very much saw myself as a public servant. I wanted to serve. Now, that sounds all very altruistic, but it is genuinely how I felt. It became incredibly hard to serve when you were, as you say, restricted by so many different things going on. And same as you guys, I felt I was having to teach things I didn't agree with. And it just became a place, as you say, where it was so restrictive. And the one thing I knew as a tutor was I wanted to be able to teach my way. But what I think the first thing I really learned, and, we talk a lot about child-centered education in school, but the first thing I really learned is that principle I can very much bring to tutoring anyway. I can still be that public servant. I can be that person that I wanted to be in school but felt restricted by. Now, I'll talk a bit later. Don't think this is utopia. I'm sure most of you know that. And I see a lot of, awful rants on certain websites or Facebook pages where people have had, a terrible misunderstanding with a parent. These things still happen. I think the difference for me is because I have that plumb line running through me that absolutely has the confidence to know what I'm talking about, absolutely has the confidence in my approach, absolutely has the confidence in the outcomes because I am proven in what I do. I still get those difficult conversations. I had one this morning, I had one yesterday, but there is that confidence. I can back myself. And I don't feel sometimes one always got that in school because there was always another agenda. As a tutor, you completely have your own agenda. That doesn't mean I'm not learning. That's why I joined the TTA, to learn, other places to get, further CPD. But I think that's one difference. We are not manipulated or pushed or whatever by anyone else. It is completely our choice. Now, part of that, I must admit, I'm no fool. I know what parents want. I know what parents need. Or rather, I know what they're telling me they need. They often come to me, why don't you do this? Why do you do this? Can you think about this? So it's not like I'm in my position, I'm completely guided by, I'm just going to do whatever I like. There are always going to be conditions on us. But in a sense, the difference is now I am able to determine which ones I want to choose, which ones I don't. And I'll say a bit more about that. Back to our philosophy. So I've got 3 pictures for you. And I want you to think about which one most resounds with you. Which one rings a bell true for you? Or do you find there's something different for you? And after we've seen the 3 pictures, I'm just going to get some of you to speak. So as a tutor, would you see yourself almost like as a compass. You know, maybe the child has the map, or the student has the map, or you have the map together. Are you the person who is the compass suggesting the way forward? Are you the one helping them navigate that map for their journey? Are you that person, you know, with the skill they're wanting to acquire, directing them or showing them directions for them to choose from, guiding them on the journeys, the different pathways that they can choose? Okay, here's another one, if you wouldn't mind, Sam. Are you a gardener? Are you a nurturer? Are you giving them the food and water that they need to grow in their skill? Are you the one helping them with the pacing and the timing to know when it's just right to add a little bit more food? But at the end of the day, they are the ones who have to take on the food and water that you give them, and they have to choose to grow themselves. We cannot force that growth. Are you that gardener? Or the third picture, are you a lighthouse? Are you the person shining light in their darkness? Are you the one giving them that literal light bulb moment? Are you the person who, you know, where everything feels like it doesn't make sense to them? Are you that person shining light on different skills and different knowledge that they can take on board and find the light for themselves? So I'm going to be quite tough here, because you might say, well, I'm a bit of all of that. It depends. Okay, I agree. But if you had to choose one, which one would you be? And I'd just like to do that. Didn't bother to do a survey. If you could just put that in chat. I understand you might be a bit of all of them, or you might be none of them and something else. If you really don't identify with any of them, but identify with something else, put that in chat as well. But I'd really like to hear from you, what you think. Thank you, William. We have one vote for compass. Gardener, gardener. Oh, yep. I get that, Natasha. I did a lot of training in P4C, so there was a lot in terms of the Socratic approach. Do you think there's a more specific metaphor then that would be more of a back and forth approach? Oh, hello, Greg. Sorry, carry on, Natasha.
Sorry, Charlotte, to interrupt. I just think that, you know, based on this prevailing philosophy I have, that we're not able to prepare for the unknown future in this technological digital age. I feel that we really just have to go with all options and a really brightly open mindset.
But you put, sorry, you were just saying a prevailing gardener but prefer a Socratic approach. So what I asked was, do you think there's a more specific metaphor that would work better for you?
I think probably more a sun, and not as in a center of a universe, but as in a bright light
on everything.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So we've got a few gardeners, a few lighthouses, some compasses. That's brilliant. The one I most relate to, but it's almost, but it is like you say, Natasha, it's all the time, I think, trying to remember, almost unlearn some of the very didactic teaching methods that I approached in school. I relate mostly to the gardener, but it's because of the skills of English, you see. And a lot of my clients, my parents, my students, but particularly parents, because also of their own upbringing and the way they were taught, they almost see my, English skills can be like a linear approach. Right, you learn full stops, then you learn this, then you learn that. And it's a constant, upward improvement. It isn't. And I constantly talk to them. I almost think as well, the student has to be a bit of a juggler as well. But, I talk to them about the nurturing nature of, being a plant. And, you sow the seeds of the different skills, but they take time to form and they take time to grow. And then you might constantly need to be watering and feed them for them to grow and flourish. And it's why I'm so passionate about children reading. And, convincing a lot of parents that reading is a skill in its own right and beneficial in its own right, not because you're then filling out a comprehension. It's almost like alien to them. But getting them to understand it's, again, this growing process of a flower, you know, thriving. But would anyone else like to explain their metaphor and why they felt that was the one for them? Please don't be shy.
I won't turn the camera on, I'm afraid, because I'm just about to go to the barber's with for a long overdue appointment. I'm just finishing off an early lunch before that, so do apologise. I'm a lighthouse because I found I've been doing this for about 4 years now. Consistently, the most satisfying moment is when a child who's struggling at school realizes that when you take an approach that suits them, the thing that you're trying to help them understand actually isn't particularly difficult. So that's why, like you said, it's that light bulb moment that fits in with lighthouses.
I love that. Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we'll move on. The reason I've asked you to do this is it will absolutely affect the way you tutor. Okay. And it will remind you, when, especially when it gets hard as well, why you are doing this. You're doing this because you're a sun. You're doing this because you're a lighthouse. You're doing this because you're a nurturer or a compass or a bit of all three, and you can switch between them. Okay. And that made a huge difference to me, particularly when I went from just managing a class. I'll be honest, I really wanted to be that nurturer at school, that gardener. I think literally, like many of you, I was a firefighter. As similar, you know, as simple as that. And again, I'm not trying to say there weren't those moments. There were lots of amazing moments in school. But the overarching thing felt like before I could be a gardener, there were so many fires to constantly put out. So, you know, you're constantly trying to do the best you can in school. But as a lot of us know, now is our chances, one-to-one or group tutors, to be this person that we want to be. Okay. Now, the practicalities of this are, you know, we need to be reminded. I get teachers all the time saying to me, oh, it sounds so wonderful, I really want this. Or I get people who aren't teachers, you know, very young in their lives, wanting, oh, I just want to do this. I just want to do this with, you know, kids, and I want to inspire them. Yes, absolutely. That's the one thing we want to do. But of course, there are roles and responsibilities with that. We can't forget that. So if we could go to the next slide, please. But we can still do these things with our philosophy. Now, this literally was just word clouds that I did, and I was trying to be positive and negative in both. So on the left-hand side, you can see my tutor role. On the right-hand side, you can see my teacher role. And of course, some words fit to both: guide, inspire, nurture. I really like the idea of Natasha saying shine a light wherever it may be and allow it to drop. You know, I really love that as well. Obviously, I've tried to show some of the negs, okay? But if we think about our role as a tutor, okay, there are some very philosophical roles. We've talked about them. You've talked about them with your, you know, your 3 different metaphors. We want to inspire. We want to guide. We want to support. We want to bring out from them what it is that makes them their best selves. And that's what I always say to my students. I want you to be your best self, however that looks for you. It's harder for me, I won't lie. I'm of that generation that was taught in a certain way that was very prescriptive. Very much the teacher at the front of the classroom. And I'm not saying that's wrong at all. And in fact, ironically, I've almost become that again, but I hope I'm a better version of that, having gone through the one-to-one process of tutoring, than I would have been if I'd stayed in teaching. Okay, so let's draw out of that a little bit more. What do we know from the kind of learning and skills and almost like, if you like, the cognitive side of things, or the skills acquisition? What do we think our role is? If people don't mind, I might ask them to speak. But if you don't want to speak or just want to stay on my, you know, just, I don't know, just put your thumb down or whatever. But it'd be nice to hear from other people. Anne-Marie, are you able to speak? Don't worry if you're not. I know some people might be marking or working or doing something as they're listening. Anyone else? Julie? or Karen or Lee, William, anyone? Don't worry, I know we might be busy. Let's go back to people. Anne-Marie, yes, do you want to speak? Excellent. Maybe not. Okay. So at the bottom, you should have a little mic emoji, and you should be able to just click it on. I'll go to someone else, but just once you've learned how to unmute your. Oh, she's done it. Are you there?
Yeah, I am. I don't usually use Google Meets, and I am multitasking because
that's all right. I would be as well.
I totally forgot about this, and I just got a reminder about it, and I'm doing other things at the same time. But yes, I can speak. However, in that little Mike, I did. What was your question again?
What do you feel from the kind of skills and learning and educator side of things is your role as a tutor?
Oh, it's really tough. I'm actually having a really tricky experience at the moment because I taught in state schools for years, big class sizes, students from quite disadvantaged backgrounds in Birmingham. And then I wanted to come out of the classroom, and I ended up moving to London. And while I was searching for something else, I decided to tutor part-time, and then it became, I really enjoyed it, and I ended up staying in tutoring, building my own business. And I've been doing that for the last 4 years, but I basically taught myself the kind of whole 11 plus sector, 13 plus, and that's what I do. So I teach a very, very different kind of population.
I'm in that world too, so don't worry.
Yeah. And then this academic year, I went back into the classroom for different reasons. 3 days a week in a private prep school.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm 3 days a week in the school, and the rest of the time I'm doing my own thing, tutoring. And I like that balance because, for lots of different reasons. But I find it very I feel less comfortable working in the private prep school than I do working with children of the similar background, but one-to-one. I feel like, even though I feel like being in the prep school, I'm still kind of part of an institution, and I don't have, it's very small class sizes. Like your tutoring setup, the school themselves actually kind of say, oh, we're more of our approach to teaching is tutoring. But I just feel my moral compass is a bit all over the place at the moment because it's extremely high fees for the school, and I really don't think this particular school is
But in your tutoring role, how do you think with the kids you tutor, what do you think the purpose is when you go into that session? What are you trying to get out of it?
So my kind of philosophy is that, so usually, not in all cases, but usually the children I'm working with are, going for these 11 plus entrance exams to very, very competitive schools. And my kind of approach and theory is, if they have to go through this, I want them to know exactly what they're doing. Not be kind of blindsided, not be kind of just sent off to these exams, to know how it works, to know how the scoring works. So I feel like my role is to help them in a healthy way be agents of their own education journey, and for them to really understand what it's all about, and to try and support them through it in the most in least stressful way as possible, and try to make it fun, and try to make it, and to celebrate those small wins and the progress that they make. And that's really, really, really hard, but I feel like I've been able to craft that.
And brilliant. And what's interesting is, as soon as you talked about your context with tutoring, you were bringing forward what it is you want. And it's really interesting. Thank you, Natasha, for your feedback. It is a very broad question, but interesting out of the context that she was talking about, she was able to draw on what she feels her role is. So can I ask you, Natasha, who works in a very different kind of situation, explain your context a little bit, but therefore what it is you feel your role is and your responsibility is.
Okay. So during COVID, my husband and I, unfortunately, our dog died. We were fur parents, and so we decided to move to a digital nomad lifestyle. So I travel and we work online. In the online context, I do work across year groups and across subjects. I did both humanities and science at tertiary level, so I'm sort of confident with the content. So I think, you know, for me to say what I do is a little bit tricky. I have a whole host of students with different needs, as in respect to the goals they're moving towards. I acknowledge that I am not going to be with them forever. And so I'm also very good at saying, you know, we need to sort of goalpost where we're heading for.
Yeah. So setting goals.
But yeah,
setting goals is something you do. And and obviously you then want them to work towards that goal. How do you, what is your role and responsibility within that?
Yeah, so I think in the chat I said, you know, fundamentally planning. So planning is starting at the base level. So where are we at now? Making some sort of acknowledgement of where we're starting, what our starting point is, planning a way forward based on what their endpoint is, and then communicating along the way. So I think sort of that's a framework that could fit in most situations, whether it's exam prep, whether it's disadvantaged students and bringing them up to, you know, an ability that they're capable of realizing, whether it's adult learners that have a set task. I think, yeah, we've got to assess a base level, plan a way forward, communicate along the way to get to the goal.
That is brilliant. Thank you for that. And I think, you know, I started with something that could be considered quite fluffy, you know, the metaphor, the guide, the compass, the this, the that. But what you've actually said is then rooted in very much kind of concrete, practical ideas, you know. So again, once you work out what your kind of your why is, why are you here for those students? That is the thing that's going to get you, you know, really on your difficult days, that will remind you why you're doing this. So for me, I'm the gardener, but within every session, and the way I look at it is you've got every single session, but then you've got that long period of time. It depends how long. And this is why, again, as Natasha said, it's a broad question because it really depends on your context. You know, are you seeing that student for 5 lessons only? Are you seeing that student for a whole year? And is the intention, so for some of my students, I am literally seeing them from year 3 and they have chosen to stay. Some of them are now in year 7 and they're going to stay all the way till year 11. So that is quite a broad role in terms of how I'm going to support that child all that time, because let's face it, I'm also going to get involved with their families. I can't help but get involved with their families. So again, thinking about what you offer will help you understand what your role is, and understanding what you offer will also help you understand your role. So for me, I am the gardener and I offer 11+ English prep and I offer GCSE English prep. And for some reason, I seem to have developed groups that want the high grades. So I'm looking at 7, 8 and 9. So I am going to be nurturing their skills. But what's important to remember is it's like you just said, Anne-Marie, because of the way I am and how I feel about education, I was not going to be that tutor who just literally, you know, sets exam upon exam upon exam, goes through it, you know, push them, pump them full of lots of, you know, worksheets and skills and knowledge, just boom, 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 boom. Here we go. This is what you're doing today. This is what, for me, what had to underpin it all, as you said, is what I wanted to nurture. So things like confidence, the self, you know, the agency you talked about, being agencies of their own learning is something really important to me. You know, when they say, what does something mean in the middle of a comprehension? we obviously aren't going to just tell them the answer. It's about what clues can you see? How can you find that information out? When I'm working with students on GCSE, how many paragraphs do I write? Now, there's a certain amount of guidance, obviously, to answer the exam, but some of it is instinctive, and it's helping those. For me, my responsibility is to develop, and role is to develop that independence in them, but through presenting them with guidance, opportunities, activities, even problem-solving activities. So, you know, even in English, I will present them with a poem, and we will not go through it. First of all, they will go through it. They will go into breakout groups. They will talk about what they think they know. They will, you know, be presented with a safety area where they can make mistakes. So for me, because of my educational approach as well, that is what I want to do. Same when I had one-to-one. If we were looking at a poem, there is no way. And a lot of my students want to be spoon-fed. They just want to be told, how many sentences do I write? What wow words do I use? You know, so I'm dealing with students where I'm having to change their mindset. So for me, it's really important about giving them that opportunity to draw out what they know, but obviously then take them further and give them opportunities into the unknown. So obviously we do look at unknown vocab. We look at how to use it. We look at what it might mean. We look at the, you know, the root words. What could it mean? How can we use it in a sentence? Where will we find it? You know, so for me, it isn't just about literally standing up at the front, presenting them with a booklet every week. No, I do have a booklet every week, but it's about the approach I then use. So that is what, again, you need to work out in your role as a tutor, depending on whether you're seeing a student literally for one day, or are you seeing them for a course, or are you seeing them continuously? And obviously, the more that you see them continuously, that's where then you are going to then get more involved with the parents. Now, when I first started groups, I hardly did anything for the parents because I was just trying to get to grips with how, you know, the structure of the session worked. But the more I've worked with them and the more they stay on and want to continue into secondary school, the more I've realized my involvement with parents is actually really important. You know, we have meetups, we have socials, they have progress meetings. We also have meetings about stress management, and they're managing their own stress and supporting them with how they can help their child at home. And I realized my role is much bigger than just being that tutor on that one lesson. That's not the same for everyone, but that is what it's become for me. So in terms of your roles and responsibilities, go back to thinking about what it is you're providing, and it can change over time. But, you know, if you're one-to-one now, what is your role? So my role as a one-to-one student was to develop that kind of inner learning in a child. And I remember I went to my first one-to-one session like a teacher. Right, we're going to do an intro, we're going to do some main body work, and we're going to do a plenary. Sometimes that can work, but in all honesty, you've got so much more freedom and flexibility with a one-to-one student. You can start with where they're at. What do you want to focus on today? You can start with, if they're working towards the 11 plus, here is a comprehension. What do you think about it? What should we do with it? What are you struggling with? What questions should we answer? So there's a lot more guidance you can give. Out of interest, how many of you are working with students where you literally turn up with nothing and it's all self-guided from them? Because your role in that situation is to support them with the things they are finding difficult and what they want to work with. Nikki, tell us about your situation.
Yeah, so I obviously purely look at the art. So everyone that comes in here is on their own journey. So I'm not at the front teaching them this is the skill. So I could have someone in here who's got anxiety and uses art as a way of chilling. And then I might have a GCSE student who's prepping her coursework. And I also teach adults as well. So they're here for all sorts of different reasons. So my thing is I start from where they're at and what the challenges are, because some of them might be really not confident with drawing or sharing their drawings and paintings and stuff, and kind of go their journey and teach the skills through their journey. So like how to do the colour wheel properly, not what they teach in school, and how to shade and look at the values and all that sort of thing. So I kind of do it. And they are a bit of rabbit headlights because they expect to be spoon fed. So it's about creating that independence and be confident to be independent with their own journey.
I think that's something that a lot of us find, you know, that independence is not there. And that's why a lot of, you know, tutees come to us in the first place, because they don't feel confident. They don't feel they're at that place. I've got an interesting situation, because where I live, it's very 11+ based, and it's very kind of high grades focused in GCSE, as I said. So obviously I have got, if you like, I've got the boundaries of a curriculum that I do have to teach, getting them ready for the 11+. But the difference is, as you say, is I've got the freedom of how I teach it, and I've got the freedom of the order and the context in which I do it. So when I worked with one-to-one, you know, we could still, to a certain extent, go with what they wanted to do, because they knew themselves what they were weak at, what they needed to work at, and we might pick, you know, a theme for a story and then work our way through that. The thing I always had to have in mind, because obviously I'm still curriculum led, is to make sure that by the end of it, those students had gained the skills they needed in order to be a certain standard. But what I found was different was having that ability to talk to them, you know, reassure them, guide them, make my own mistakes, model, you know, and to do it at their pace was what made the difference for them. What I find in group sessions now is, obviously I'm working at a certain pace, and I'm working through a certain amount of things that I want to achieve in that lesson. But what I also find is, again, because I'm still doing my own thing and I can reschedule and reshuffle as I like, you know, I remember one week in year 4, we suddenly got into knock jokes, because we'd had knock in one of the spellings, and I was joking with them and putting it in a sentence, and they wanted to know more about that, and they wanted to understand about puns, and they wanted to understand about wordplay, and they wanted to understand about, you know, polysemy and things like that, and they wanted to understand about words with multiple meanings. And we were able to spend a good quality 10 minutes time going with where they were at, and then we made it into almost like a competition, who can come up with the best knock joke every week. So, and then of course anything I hadn't covered, I just moved it and put it in a different place. Now, to a certain extent you can do that with teaching, but I found, you know, if I wasn't keeping up with the other teachers in my year group and they were all saying, well, you should have moved on to this by now, you know, there was still that sense of you should be covering what everyone else is covering. Do you know what I mean? I am still the governor of my own world, so I'm able to, even with groups, add that level of personalization. And, you know, I might get an email saying, oh, your child, my child hasn't got this week, can you help me? Send videos, send support material, change the way I do things again to add a game in for the next lesson that will help that child. So as you say, there's still a lot of guidance that we can provide, but with that, with my situation, that kind of sense of rigor that we need as well. Would anyone else like to comment before we move on what you feel your role and responsibility is?
Charlotte, you've just triggered me to think as well. I'll let Aslan go ahead. I'll let Aslan go ahead.
And then speak. Go on. Who's first? I didn't see who it was.
It was me.
Hi.
Hello. So I think what Nikki's spoken about as well. I guess the role varies depending on the age, the ability.
Yes.
But I think it comes back to that thing of variety as well. So being a tutor, you're able to adapt to all these different kind of all these different personalities that you interact with with the students, the parents. And I think what's the difference between being a teacher as well, sorry, is that I guess you kind of lack that variety, since you're kind of, I guess, stuck with a certain year group as a form tutor, or working with certain year groups within, I guess, teaching. And so I think our role as tutors kind of varies, and I think it's being able to being able to accept that and work with those different personalities and abilities you meet. And it could be the same age. For example, at the moment I'm teaching a few 11+ students, they're all around the same age, year 5, year 6, but their personalities and different abilities is kind of something that I've had to kind of get used to. And I think now it's quite rewarding because I've kind of worked out how to approach each student, and I feel like they're all excelling. So I think it's just being able to understand the variety of the students you can get, and also sorry.
No, go
on. So it's just understanding the different types of students you can get and how to approach them. I think that's key to start with.
And what I loved what you said about context, this is why I didn't want to put together like a 3-point plan. These are your roles. This is what you do, because it's impossible. As Natasha again, reminded us, it's a broad question. You can't just say, but what you can do is take your context and what your context then suggests to you. So look, let's face it, 11+, absolutely. The number one priority, let's face it, is what parents want, get their child through it. We know that. So, in my context, therefore, I cannot be so fluffy that it's like I can turn up to a group of kids and go, what do you want to do this today? I cannot do that. To a certain extent, I can with my one-to-one GCSE students, because my role in that context is to troubleshoot. So I offer a limited amount of one-to-ones a year near the, near the exams, and they get a maximum of 2 lessons each if they want, because I still teach them in a group. But that's where it's very much, okay, what do we need? What do you need from me today? How can I support you to access what you need? For someone else, Nikki doing art, completely different. But what I've also decided, though, is I'm not going to be that 11+ tutor who stresses out those kids. Yes, we need to get through that curriculum. But like you, Aslan, I'm going to do it in a way that's engaging, that's memorable, that's actually going to stick, that actually my other complete role I have put on myself is to help those children have a love of reading and writing that will go beyond my lessons, so that they maintain that love of English and that independence. I want that to be something that is long lasting for them, and provide, where I need to, the other soft skills, these wraparound support of needing the stress management, the stress relief. Natasha, I triggered you.
No, I just was wondering about how we can utilize student-led, student-centered learning when we come with this I think conditioning of teaching and having a framework and the curriculum, and this is what we need to learn. And I think to a certain extent we're still going to be boundaried by that. Our processes are still very much assessment based in whichever context we're using. But I think what Nikki referred to as the craft is that we take that student-centered and student-led interest, Aslan referred to as well, knowing your students, and the craft is then tailoring, taking the skills that we can embed with their interests so that they do move forward.
Yeah, I love that. Interestingly, so one thing I've done today, I mean, it's a little bit shoehorned, don't get me wrong, because, when you're working in what feels like more a teaching role. But for instance, we're doing newspaper reports on a celebrity who has won an award. But I took it from their interests first of all. So, of course, we've got the cricketers, we've got the footballers, we've got the I haven't just set something for them and given them a set thing. These are very much teacher skills that we do naturally, which is why I say, the more we can just remember who we're doing this for and making it, as you say, as child-centered as possible within the realms and the boundaries of what we have to do. I have to teach them news reports, but I can do it in a way that's going to pique their interest, that's going to, get them to research because they want to, not because I've given them some 18th century scientist. That's not to say there aren't places for that as well. And those can become, what we do for challenges, and we can create quizzes from those. But like you say, it's piquing their interest. I've got something from Julie here who says, I have an idea of what to teach one-to-one, but will adapt as the session continues as I see what the child... Exactly. You can start with a starting point. And to be honest, I always had a starting point. I always had somewhere I wanted to go. If the student then didn't want to do that, we binned it. But we can always, don't be afraid of starting with something, particularly, as I say, if you're doing exam-based subjects. You need, you know, at some point they're going to have to look at an exam paper with you. But, you know, we have the flexibility to take that as long as it takes. I remember, you know, I do have week 1, week 2, week 3 booklets, but I remember we were still doing week 6 on week 8. Does that matter? No. Are they getting the skills they need? Yes. You know, so even with what I do, which I do have a certain structure, I am always wary that I can change that. So talking about structure, let's move on to the third thing. So we've talked about our philosophy, our why. Roles and responsibilities. I know I haven't gone into a lot here. We could talk about safeguarding. You know, we could talk about what to do about that. That is a different conversation. And, you know, there are things that we do have to do. So when I'm doing my groups, I have to have insurance. I have to have, you know, because I'm working in a public building, I have to have the skill to work with the centre manager to deal with that. I didn't really want to go into that today, but, you know, just to bear in mind, obviously, there are other really legal and binding responsibilities we need. And that's why I joined the TTA in the first place, so that I could make myself fully aware of those. But, you know, it's your role that I think is more central in the way you're guiding the student that's more important. Let's go on to the structure of the lesson. And again, I cannot give you a 3-point plan on this. It really depends whether you're one-to-one, whether you're groups, small groups, big groups. But here are some ideas for you. So Sam, if we could do the next slide. So simple one. You start at one point, you finish at another. Now, this could be in one session. This could be in 5 weeks. This could be the whole year. You can break it down. So for me, it depends on whom I'm working with. But say I'm working with, I'll give you an idea. I'm working with groups at the moment. We're looking at language paper 1, AQA. So my start point is making sure they all understand the requirements of each question. My finish point is that they are all capable of answering each question and they feel confident about it, and hopefully have moved up in terms of the, you know, the tiers from, they've moved up from, say, tier 3 to tier 4 within the grading system, but have the confidence to be able to replicate that and revise for that. So that's one idea. Now that's over, well, it's more than a 5 week. We dip in and out of language paper 1 throughout a few years, in fact. But say if it's one lesson, you want to do, like I'm doing, newspaper writing. Now, again, I can't actually do that in one lesson. But one of the things we did was we looked at a good model. We looked at the features of it. We looked at how we wanted to maybe use some of those ideas in our own writing. We then planned and wrote it, not all in one lesson, but you've got a clear starting, finishing point. Next slide, please. A wavy line. Like I said about my knock jokes, I had a starting point within the lesson. It took a little turn. I've had lessons where I've been under the assumption through previous teachings that all my students are at one place and therefore we can go quite quickly to another place, but realized some of the students didn't understand something. We had to take a little diversion. We had to move off a little bit, even with one-to-one, you know, assuming somebody knew what a simile was. Let's spot the similes in this poem. What's a simile? Oh, okay, right, we better, you know, we have taught it before, but never mind, we'll do it again. Let's remind ourselves. Of course, you know, I haven't even talked about prior learning and making sure you're working from a starting point. I'm kind of being facetious here, but you get the idea. Things might not always twist and turn and you have a straight finish line. Next slide, please. Now, this is an interesting one. So what I've tried to do here is give you a model of basically what my actual 11 plus lessons look like. Because we cover different things, we don't just cover one thing at a time. It's quite unusual and quite, and this is where, as I say to you, I had to completely change what I knew as a teacher and what I'd been doing even with one-to-one students, where we can have those lovely little conversations or we can have a clear goal and just go for it. Because of the nature of group tuition and because of the nature of the 11 plus, and there's so much to get through, it's really hard just to plan one thing at a time. You need to dip into lots of different things in every session. And this is something that was completely new to me and I found really hard. And that's why I said in my first lesson ever that I did group tutor, I said to my sister, I'm not doing that again. That was terrible. We are banning that. We are throwing that away. And I had with a system where we had lots of different starting and finishing points within the lesson, session rather, I prefer to say session, you know, where we would start one thing, we would delve into that a little bit. I would teach them key skills. We would then build on that for next week. So that was one skill. We then started on another one. And obviously, like I'm talking about maybe 20-minute, you know, little mini sessions within one big session. So basically what I do in my sessions is I do some key comprehension skills, key creative writing, and then we look at an element of SFAG. So if you like, I've got all these little start finish lessons going on within one session. So I've got that going on. And then the final slide, and this is the one I think works incredibly well. Now, interestingly, so you see, some of you I know came to Samantha and my webinar last week on group tuition. Samantha and I run our groups completely differently. She has a much smaller number for a start, and many times she will literally start with a question. What are we going to do today? Not always. I'm not trying to misquote her, but you know, she will start with that with a group. Obviously, you can also start with that with a one-to-one. And she has a very different approach. And one of the things I said to her was, okay, so what do you do if a child says they want to do comprehension this lesson? And she said, okay, so I have, you know, I've curated over 100 years, you know, a whole file of comprehension. So I'll just draw one up. Do you see? And I was like, okay. So it would be wrong to say she was never prepared, because she is completely prepared, because she has this library of resources that she can just go, okay, we're going to do that. Whereas my preparation is very different. My prep is very much, we're going to come with this today and you're going to work on this and we'll see where this takes you. Okay. I often have times though, where, you know, the children want to take the learning further than I've given them. So, you know, again, I know it might be hard to explain, but within my session, there is a lot of personalization that can go on. Okay, it might be extra, but you know, it's for the children who either want to do something different, or they want to continue the learning, or they need an extra little bit of support. So we'll do this instead. So there are some different structures for you. So what I want to know again, I'm aware we are going over, so apologies if you have to leave. Sam, I'm not done with the PowerPoint, but I'm happy to close it down right now, because I think people mainly know where to find me. But what I want to know is, again, which of the are you going, Natasha? Thanks so much. Which of those models does that aligns with you the most? Which of those models aligns with you the most? The straight line, the wavy line, the multiple kind of lines, or the question? If you could write in chat, that would be brilliant. Thank you, Ella. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think for a lot of us, if we work with an hour, you know, especially if we're one-to-one, probably just working on one thing that whole time is not going to happen. And also, if you remember in teaching, okay, you could set them a piece of creative writing and then it, you know, just get them to write for an hour. I know we've talked a lot about how that could be problematic in terms of what people are paying you for. I do have students write in my lessons, but they would write maybe for 10 minutes and then we share, you know, so you're constantly looking at ways in which to, you know, get that input in, but also get time out from them. Also, depending on how your structure is, will depend on whether you have to give homework or not. So obviously in my structure, because I am touching on a lot of things, and not finishing anything necessarily, it does then lead to being able to do homework. But what you might do is touch on something, work on it for 1 week, and then come back to it next week. So again, there are lots of ways in which you can manage the way you want your structure to be with these different models. I think we can take the PowerPoint down now, if that's okay. Yep, that. You know where I am, everybody. That last one is, just by the way, that is a link to, if you are more interested in group classes and want information about the group class course that Samantha McMahon and I run. But I'm very happy to close down. And really, I know we probably want to end quite soon, but if there are any final questions or anything anyone wants to say, obviously in one lesson we can't talk about everything to do with the difference between teaching and tutoring, but I am hoping that I've given you a little taster of those 3 areas, the taster of what is your philosophy that can really help drive your tutoring, what your roles and responsibilities should be, helping you to think about that depending on your context, and what your educational kind of approach is. And then again, the structure you might want to put in your session. I never finish on time. I do apologize.
Don't worry at all, Charlotte. Thanks so much for all your efforts. And yeah, and thank you very much to everyone for turning up as well. Fantastic session as always, as expected. But look, guys, if you're interested in more of the TTA Spotlight series, check out the newsletters that goes out every month, which always has the upcoming next one's coming. Apologies, there was a date incorrect for the last newsletter, but everything else was correct, and so hopefully you obviously made it there on time. Looking forward to seeing you at the next sessions, and there's more coming up soon.